The these were these two. I think one of them.
Yeah. Get your name on.
Sure.
Just put them in there. Okay, good morning, guys. There's two things I'm asking you to turn in. One I meant to ask for last class.
Good morning, Fayetteville High School. It
but they're both under Bellbird, so look that over during the minute of silence, please.
One on and one is 6. I was sick last class.
Yep, that's fine. Put them in there, I'll figure it out. Okay, so again, if I didn't get your FRQs 110, I know I have a different set to ask for also, I just didn't ask for them yet. And your 5 or less corrections from Unit 4 or 5 progress checks, that was the last day before spring break. Those are the 2 things I'm asking for today. So if I don't have those, make sure your name's on them and kind of turn them into the basket in just a second. Okay, so today class is going to be structured basically the same way that we did last class, which is where I'd like us to spend roughly the first half of class just looking at AP review, so some stuff from last semester that you haven't thought about in a while. Try to remind you that, you know, some of that stuff we've looked at, you haven't thought about in a while. It's kind of tough, especially at first if you go in cold. Which is what you're doing today, but it's better that you do that today than on the AP exam. So both of the FRQs we're going to look at this morning are the same type of FRQ. These are called graph analysis. So last class I gave you 2 of the same type called particle motion. So the particle motion questions have a lot of position, velocity, acceleration, speeding up, slowing down, that type of stuff. And then graph analysis obviously has something to do with graphs. I don't want to tell you too much because I want you to go into the first one cold. So, like we have been doing here, in just a second I will ask you to give me a 15-minute effort on the front of this, which is 2019 FRQ3. So, it's a no calculator one, and again, you haven't thought about it in a while, so this one's going to feel pretty rusty, and that's okay. And we'll look at the scoring together, talk about some of the highlights that I think are worth verbalizing as review, give you some time to look that over and hopefully fill in some gaps on that, and then retry it on the back, even though it's a different FRQ and it's not asking the same exact things, it's asking for the same type of FRQ. So I think the back FRQ is actually harder than the front, so the back will be easier and that you've thought about the graph analysis, but it will be harder because it was just a harder one. And I'm saying it's a harder one because it had a lower average. So for us to start off, again, your FRQs that are calculator allowed will only be FRQs 1 and 2. This is FRQ number 3 for both of these. So both years these were no calculator. So don't use a calculator, please. Remember, you do not need to simplify any of your arithmetic. And otherwise, I don't want to give too many clues. Any questions about the directions before I set your 15-minute timer? Okay, again, make sure that you're doing the front, which is the 2019 FRQ3. Don't do the 2022 FRQ3 until after. Okay. I set you a 15-minute timer, so again, just do the best you can. This was your AP exam. You see what the average is on the top. If you can get the average or better going into this cold, that is great. And if you get lower than the average, you at least realize it. And when we look at the scoring guide, you will hopefully pick up a couple skills so that you could get above average next time. and stop. So there's your 15 minutes. Again, as I said, this one, based on how third period did yesterday, seemed like they probably felt like they ran out of time on this one. Some of these took some more thought. But again, the 15 minutes isn't a cutoff, it's just an average. If you wanted to spend 20, 30 minutes on this on your AP exam, you could. You would just have to cut that time from some other FRQ. So remember, I do want you to do corrections in a different colored pen or pencil. I've got plenty of extras in this drawer over here. If you need to come borrow one, just put it back when you're done so it's there waiting for you. But one thing I need to convince you of, so 2 of these is not going to be enough practice for you to feel like you're ready to see this type on the AP exam. I need you to understand that. But I also need you to understand, I think I'm going to have you practice another one of this type on Thursday, so I think you'll think it's a little easier by then. But I need to convince you that this is an important type of FRQ. So you have 6 FRQs on your AP exam. They don't tell us what it's going to be or anything like that. All I can do is give you hints and give you practice on based on what they've done in the past. So remember, if you know that after class today that you need extra practice on this skill, maybe more than other people, class website, little ways down, there's FRQ database. FRQ database looks like this. And today, the 2 I'm asking you to do, well, you just did one of them, this is called graph analysis. So you can either click this link or you could go down here. But the reason I'm pulling it up is, 1, to remind you there's lots of extra practice that we just won't have class time to get to. But I also need to convince you that this is worth your time to fill in the gaps of some of these skills and get caught back up, because this was asked in 2024. I just didn't put it on here. It was asked in 2023, 2022, 21. Why do you think it missed 2020? Yeah, COVID, the AP exam in the COVID year was very different. It was like 2 massive FRQs, like 45 minutes each or something, so it was totally different. It was asked in 2019, 18, 17, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 6, 4, 3. Pretty much every year there is this type of FRQ. So, again, especially the back one that you haven't done yet, the average on that one is a little bit lower, but it's certainly worth your time and your studying as far as trying to prepare for the AP exam. Now, what makes a graph analysis a question, obviously there's a graph on the top, but at some point you needed to think about the area under the graph to the x-axis. So if you didn't think of that, I don't know if you would get any points. But what I did, so here's mine, I actually wrote, when I do this one, I actually write it on the figure. So I figured out this guy's area because he was a triangle, 1/2 base times height. This guy was a triangle, I did 1/2 base times height, but I made it negative. You remember why I made it negative? Right below the x-axis, so that's why it's negative. This one was a triangle, 1/2 base times height, and then this one was quite a bit different. So to come up with this one, if you knew you needed the area but you didn't know how to do it, first off, in the directions they tell you this is a quarter circle. So if you imagined this whole square being filled in, side times side would be 9, but some of this is not filled in. How much is not filled in is this quarter circle, so 1/4 of pi r squared, where r is 3. So that's where that's coming from. Now again, I haven't even looked at the questions yet, but I know that I'm going to need these for several different parts. So that's the part I wanted to work out so that you could see, and if you didn't think to do that, again, that's the first thing maybe not the first thing you have to do, it's fine to read the question first, but you're going to need to know those areas for these graph analysis questions. Okay, so if you feel like this was a very tough one, again, I can kind of understand that. But after we go over part A, I feel like you should be able to get all parts of part A after I give you a little bit of a tip here. So part A asks us to find you have to remind me, I don't have it on here. Integrate this function from what to what?
Negative 6 to 5.
-6 to 5. Okay, so you have to remember the very first connection I made for you on integration is that integration is a way to calculate area under a curve. So this is basically, and how you want to phrase this in your head, is how much area is there from -6 to 5. And at first you might think this is a typo because this only goes to -2. There's no typos on your AP exam. They spend probably millions of dollars field testing their questions to make sure that they're good and ready to go. So really what it wanted to know is the area from -6 to 5. That gives me the answer to this. Well, based on this work, I know the area from -2 to 5 because I can just add up these area parts. The area from -2 to 5 is whatever 1/2 minus 3/4 plus 9/4 plus 9 minus 9 pi over 4 is. Now remember, FRQs, you don't have to simplify arithmetic. If you want to combine that stuff together, great, but if you mess it up when you combine it, then you're going to miss that point. So I'm just going to leave it as is. So,
I think they give us the area for this one, but they want us to evaluate something else. So like it says -6 to 5 equals 7.
okay. Again, I don't have the question for me. So this total area was 7, and they're actually asking you to find the area from -6 to -2.
Yeah.
Okay. Now again, I don't like to give you any hints because I like you to see if you thought of this. You need to learn some different strategies. When I do it like this, if this whole area is 7 and I want to find out this much area and I know how much this area is, do you see I can just say it's 7, subtract all of that stuff? Does that make sense? If this plus this equals 7, so let me write that out. The area from -6 to -2 plus the area from -2 to 5 is the same thing as the area of the whole thing, which is 7. Again, just keep phrasing in this area in your head. And so what we were trying to find was this, so you could subtract this over, just like you're solving an equation. And the answer to part A is 7 minus this, which is all of this junk. 1/2 minus 3/4 plus 9/4 plus 9 minus 9 pi over 4. Again, I have no interest in simplifying that because it's all arithmetic. Now the only catch, so here's the answer. The only catch to that is when I show you the scoring guide in a second, they are going to simplify it. So if your answer looks different but you think it's equivalent, the only way I can tell you whether it's right or not, because I can't memorize every form of the answer, but if I threw this in my calculator and got its nasty decimal, and I take their answer and throw it in the calculator and look at its nasty decimal, if they're the same decimal, they're equivalent. If they're different decimals, they're not equivalent. Okay, so my suggestion would be try to set this up so you can see this area you were trying to find plus this area that you could find by hand was equal to 7 because I gave you that in the directions, and then that gives you a setup on how to find that. So the scoring, they gave 3 points for this. Now, so the first point, you don't necessarily have to do it in mathematical terms, but you needed to do something with pencil to paper that shows you understand the area from -6 to 5 is the same thing as the area from -6 to -2 plus the area from -2 to 5. So if you have something that shows you understand how those are the same, that's worth a point. Now if you only thought it and you didn't write it down, that's an easy fix for next time. Nothing is obvious, nothing is assumed, especially when it comes to calculus stuff. Okay, they gave one answer for, or I'm sorry, 1 point for the area from -2 to 5. So that was, if you simplified it, that was 9 minus 9 pi over 4. That's the same thing as this mess. It's got the minus 9 pi over 4. If you combine the plus 9 plus a half minus 3/4 plus 9/4, you would get 9 minus 9 pi over 4s. So if you just did that, if you did the area part by hand correctly and you showed that, then you get a point. But the final answer was this or something equivalent to this. Again, I didn't write it that way. Mine has a big messy arithmetic, but if I put mine in the calculator, it would be equivalent to that. So if you left it unsimplified arithmetic, again, the only quick way for me to tell you if you got that third point is type your answer in the calculator, look at the decimal, type 9 pi over 4 minus 4 in the calculator. If it's the same decimal, then they're equivalent and it should be fine. So all things considered, you had to understand integration means area under a curve. You had to understand that this area plus this area is equal to the whole area. And you had to find the area of 3 triangles and this part of a square that's outside of a quarter circle. So again, I feel like you are unlikely to get most of those 3 points, but I feel like you should have a decent chance the next time you're asked something like that. You should have some strategies on how to deal with that. Okay, is there anything else you would like to ask about part A? Okay, part B wanted us to, okay, honestly I don't remember what the exact question was, but that's okay, because we're just checking the scoring anyway. So part B, they gave 1 point if you came out with the answer. So the answer is 2 plus 2 square roots of 5 or something equivalent to it. So you could have 4 plus 2 square root of 5 minus 2. That would be the same thing. And they gave you 1 point if you showed and correctly did this integration. Now, there's a couple different ways you can write this, so honestly there's a million different ways you can write this, but I guess this one had 2 very common ways. So when I ask you this first point, I really feel like you should be able to get this first point, and it's a little more obvious than it seems like, because this is asking for the antiderivative of f prime. So what can you take the derivative of to get f prime? And then you're evaluating it from 5 to 3. The thing that you can take the derivative of to get f prime is f. Evaluate from 3 to 5. So you got 1 point if you did that part, 1 point for the answer. And I did not ask anybody this yesterday, but I just know from experience, there's a good chance when you integrated this, you just said it was 4. But the antiderivative of 4 is not 4. This would be 4x, and 4x from 3 to 5 is not 4. It's 8. So be careful integrating a constant. It's not just a constant. Okay, part C. So this is a very common thing that comes up with these questions. It asks you to find the absolute max value. So to me, that reminds me of extreme value theorem. Notice their answer guide here says nothing about extreme value theorem. You don't have to name it. But the nice thing about extreme value theorem is it told you what could possibly be the biggest and smallest points, the absolute maxes and absolute mins. It tells you to check endpoints, which notice were the endpoints here, -2 and 5. I don't have the question in front of me. I think these two were the endpoints. And to test critical numbers. The absolute biggest and absolute smallest have to occur either at endpoints or at critical numbers. So the derivative of g, critical numbers are when the derivative is 0 or undefined. So you had to take the derivative of g, which is the same thing as f. If you showed that, if you wrote that down, you get a point. They're asking you to work with a function g and they give you a graph f, so you have to make that connection. You can't get information you need to answer this from f if you're talking about a whole different function g. Okay, but that occurs, those critical numbers, you can just look at the graph. F of x equals 0, that's the x-intercepts at these two. So here were the critical numbers. And really you should test both of them, but if you even just tested -1 for whatever reason, you get the second point. So if somewhere in your work you showed that you thought -1 could possibly be the absolute max, that's worth a point. And then when we did this table is called the candidates test. The answer should be pretty obvious. It's the biggest value. So that would be this one. But the justification can be very complicated unless you make this table. This table is called a candidates test. It is the easiest way to get the justification. Because if you don't do the candidates test, you need to explain to me, why didn't you test x equals 1? Why didn't you test x equals 2? Why didn't you test x equals 3? Why didn't you test x equals 2.5? You need to explain why you didn't bother testing those other values. If you do a candidates test, you can just show the endpoints and the critical numbers, and that's good enough for the justification. This candidate test is by far the easiest way to get the justification here.
I didn't do extreme value here. Would integral is area under the curve, and x equals 5 gives the most area suffice?
How do you know x equals 5 has the most area?
Because the two areas at the start kind of equal out, but everything above that keeps adding to the total until you get to the x enters the 0 of the graph, which is at 5. So everything for that just keeps increasing.
Okay, so did you write out a couple sentences explaining that?
I just said integral is area under curve, and that gives the most area, but not really.
Yeah, so you needed, what you said to me made sense, and I could follow that. You could say basically the area from here to here cancels out and goes to 0, and then it gets a little bit smaller because that's below the x-axis, but then it gets a lot bigger because it's above the x-axis. If you want to say that out in a couple sentences, that's fine, but what you told me you wrote on your paper would not be enough. I think what you said out loud would be fine. Again, I'm not saying that candidates test is the only way to get the justification point. I'm just saying it's the easiest. It's the least amount, it's the least problematic. Okay, and then finally the last part, I think you guys will be kind of happy about this one. So this is pretty random. Limit questions are always kind of random. They tend to throw those on as part D for just a point, maybe 2 points. But when we did limits, you should always start off with direct substitution. So they have this mess of stuff, and then notice everywhere there was an x, they replaced with a 1. So 10 to the first is 10. Now f prime of 1, this is not arithmetic. How are you supposed to know the derivative of f at 1? Okay, what about the graph?
Slope.
Right. Remember, derivative means slope. So you go to the graph, look at the slope at x equals 1, and that was 2. So again, f prime of 1 is not arithmetic. You change it to times 2. Times 2 is arithmetic. F of 1 is not arithmetic. This just comes from the graph. On the graph, when x equals 1, y equals 1. That's where they got a 1 there. Okay, what about arctan of 1? What does that mean?
Inverse tangent 1.
Okay, so why is that pi over 4?
Because
Tangent equals 1, right? Pi over 4.
It does. So if you did pre-cal last year, the angle that's within the range of inverse tangent, where tangent is 1, is pi over 4. The part that I said you're going to like about this, or I think you're going to like about this, and I was very surprised to hear this, but I've heard this in multiple trainings that I have to do. They considered arctan of 1 arithmetic. So if you stopped here, you get that point. If you got to here, this is equivalent to it, that's fine, you got that point. But if you tried to do arctan of 1 and you got something other than pi over 4, then you missed it at the last second. So again, I'm kind of surprised that they consider arctan of 1 arithmetic, but I have been assured that it is. So try not to go further with that. Even if you think you know it, it's not worth the risk of missing the point in the end. So, Hayden, did you have something to ask there?
No.
Okay. The only so you guys should be able to work with inverse trig functions. Again, the problem is, those of you that did pre-cal last year, you have to remember that there's a limited range of those, and so really you have to memorize the range of inverse tangent so that there's only one time where tangent is 1, because you can't have different answers there. Tangent's also 1 at 3 pi over 4, but putting 3 pi over 4 there is not correct. So if you remember all that, I guess that's great, but I wouldn't roll the dice. I would stop right here. So when you see that, this should look a lot easier now, because all I did is plug in a 1. This comes from slope because it's derivative. This is a point because it's just the function value, and this I could leave alone. There's the answer. Everything else is considered arithmetic. Okay, so as I said, we have not talked about graph analysis, and I think we did 1 or 2 first semester, but it had no integration parts into it. It was just derivative stuff. So this one is going to be pretty rough. You should have probably been pretty rusty. So this one had an average of, what does your top of your page say? 2.7. Okay, so if you got 3 or better, that is great, especially not having any hint, not reviewing for it right before it, all that kind of stuff. 3 or better is great. If you got 0, 1, or 2, you need to find 2, 3 points that you feel like you could get on this type of FRQ next time. The problem is, when you do the back FRQ, it's also a graph analysis. That doesn't mean it's going to ask this type of part A again. It might not. It might ask a question like part B again, but it might not. It might ask a question like part C, often does, but it's not guaranteed. It might ask a limit question again like part D, but maybe not. So typically, I don't know, probably 2 of the 4 parts will be similar, and the other 2 parts will be a slight variation on that. So finish making any corrections you need to there. If I moved on from that too quickly, again, you've got the bit.ly link on the top of that page printed out for you so that it's easy to use. Now, I am not going to set a timer for you on the second one because, again, the most important thing is that you try to learn from your mistakes. So if you only need to look at this first FRQ for 2 minutes before you feel like you've absorbed the stuff you didn't think about and absorbed the stuff that you missed, then that's great. In 2 minutes, start the back FRQ. If you need to spend 20 minutes looking over the front FRQ to feel like you can get another 2 or 3 points out of it, then spend 20 minutes. That's invaluable. It's too important. The learning from your mistakes and learning from what you didn't think about is just as, if not more important than just more and more practice. Things only get easier, more familiar, the more you do them. So, go ahead and finish up your study with that, and then when you're ready, go ahead and set yourself a 15-minute timer and flip over to the back. Everybody's going to start that at a slightly different time, so again, I'm not doing a timer for you, but when you finish that, pull up the scoring guide, do your corrections in a separate color. Again, the back FRQ is harder in the sense that it had a lower average, so I don't think you're going to just instantly feel like it's all of a sudden easy, but some parts of the first FRQ, the front, should mirror some of the back FRQ, so some parts will be a little easier this time. Okay, and again, I was expecting that this would, for you to finish that up, would be roughly first half of class. So whenever you were done with the back FRQ, this is the 111 is an assignment I will take up on Thursday. But with the second half of class, again, our Unit 8 test is still not next class. I think I mentioned that I'm just not usually in a big hurry for that. As long as we do it before the AP exam, you know, if anything, I'm giving you extra time to review that. So you had assignment 107. I think last time I saw you, I asked you to start looking at those skills and maybe start practicing some of that if you feel unprepared for the Unit 8 test. So please continue on that. So whenever you finish this back FRQ, put some time into that 107 topic list so that you know you are in good shape for that Unit 8 test when it rolls around. Okay, I've got a ton of homework papers I need to pass back to you guys, so I'm going to pass back a bunch of these. Of course, go ahead and stop me and call me over, though, if there's something I can, if there's a math question I can help with. Again, I've got several papers to pass back, so probably just want to leave them to the side until I tell you I give up. If you put them away in your binder, and then I bring you another one a few minutes later, and you put it away in your binder, and I bring you another one a few minutes later, you're gonna get pretty annoyed, so just wait until the end. So here's G. So to change G to G prime, I want to take the derivative of this side, which means you gotta, your equation balance, you gotta take the derivative of that side. And you're gonna remember this as soon as I start saying it. When you take the derivative of an integral and the bottom's a constant, remember you just get to plug this in. So that's why I just write that as X. That's one of the fundamental terms of calculus. Does that make sense? If you take the derivative of an integral and the bottom's a constant, the top just plugs in everywhere it can. So the t becomes x times the derivative of the top. But the derivative of the top is well, when you plug in the bottom, you get a bunch of numbers, but then when you take the derivative on the outside, the derivative is constant to the zeros anyway. That's why it doesn't matter. If you have the class website, scroll down. Recognize that pattern, it's a 5-second question, and if you don't, it looks really confusing. Fundamental theorem of calculus that will 100% be under review.
said you wanted to have y'all have a final exam. AP exam's way more important than the final. I would rather you put all your study and time into doing AP exam. The final exam grade you're not gonna care about in 5 years. Your AP exam could save you money and time in the future, so.
Again, especially once you move on to the scoring part, if you have a question, what they're talking about, or how did they know, anything like that I can help with. I know I have a link to a video on there, but you're also welcome to ask me while you're here. And some of these papers are pretty old. If you were gone the day I passed them back, and then you never picked them up. So. did last semester.
Of course, you don't need to stop what you're doing, but make sure that you guys put these assignments back in your binder in the order that they're supposed to go in. Especially with AP test not too far away. If you need to look up something, you don't have to dig through 100 papers to find the right one. Just you can find the number from Gradebook or from the class website. And then just turn to that page in your binder if it's in order.
What's the page you call it?
That's the candidates test. Because you're just testing the ones that could, you're testing candidates, possible. You don't have to know the name, you don't have to refer to it by name, though. Sorry, cool. Brandon. Oh. Well, okay, I didn't know this was yours. This was just extra practice. I actually see your name there, but I was gonna say, now I know your handwriting, no, you know that later.
I didn't know that in the system.
Anyway, it wasn't one for a grade anyway, it was just extra practice.
Okay, you guys still have just almost 30 minutes of class, so.
I'll remember that. I think we just a page on that. I don't know if I ever found it or not, but.
Your bill, no name paper from this class, the unit 1 progress check corrections, somebody did them and didn't get points for them. You didn't have your name on it, and I wasn't able to figure it out. Put your name on it, put it back in the back.
Mr. Talker.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it was last week. I turned in the 4 and 5A corrections early, and you like marked the page correct, and then said you don't do these later. I already graded them.
Okay, you have to let me see it again, I forgot.
I get mine as well.
I don't know what happened. I remember, like,
Oh, okay, then it must be someone else too. I just say I don't remember as well.
I have questions for you. So this one, you give me a point for that. Everybody did like up here, and then down here, like that.
Well, that's not gonna be possible on your AP exam, because this is gonna be on your computer, and then this is gonna be your paper. So, if you, actually, I still think it probably wouldn't count, only because, like, if you tell me the area here, how do you know the area has anything to do with that interval? Like, there's still a calculus connection that I'm not sure you know. I mean, I think you know it, but if you didn't write it down, yeah.
You done?
that's just.
Arrow.
team's right, it's still just so long about Lakers.
They got third seed, didn't they? I don't know, Warriors.
Third seed and half the NBA. So
It actually says
six best teams for play had the greatest player of all time.
it says 40. It says area of the region for these things. I didn't see that, but so would it count? Because I put area of the region. Does it say or that or it's just?
If I had to guess, I think they would probably give you the point. But I don't think they would ever really say that. Because they're a little more lenient than they say. So I would try to correct that moving forward, but I would
Also write down the.
I want a Thunder Cavs final. That's the two best teams, obviously.
That would be boring. Shane is a boring player.
Their matchups is usually more fun.
I don't really know how to ask.
well, I don't know that they're the best team. A lot of teams don't really know this on the final.
Or the Bronze.
Well, Thunder are the best team in the West.
When he's not pretending to be hurt.
He's 40, of course he's gonna be hurt.
Thunder are the best team in the West because it's 68 wins to 52nd for second place. Eastern could be argued between the Celtics and Cavs because they're 64 and 61. So I guess that's right out there.
Thunder's not the best team in the West.
They're 68 wins. 68 to 14.
Yeah, they'll be out in the first round or second round of it.
They don't have a lot of experience, so.
The next team is sneaky too.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, some teams try hard during the season, and some teams, the problem is if you try to win every game, you exhaust your players and you run the risk of injury. So some teams want to make it to the final. But they don't, at the end, if you win the playoffs, you win the playoffs. It doesn't matter if you had 80 wins during the regular season or 20 wins, as long as you get to the finals.
I'm just like not finding out.
It really doesn't matter in the NFL because of the 70, I mean, in the NBA because the 70 series it produces a lot of variance.
Like home court advantage.
Well, just variance in general, it's usually why you put just the best team in the final. And I think based on the record, in A2 this season, the Thunder is the best team.
We'll see. We'll see if they win.
I do think that you may be right about the Cavs not making it though. I think the Celtics may just make another playoff run because they're only 3 losses behind the Cavs in the regular season.
But see, like, the Celtics have known they're going to the playoffs for weeks.
Yeah.
So they've been coasting and making sure no one gets injured. So they probably could wanted to more games if they wanted to, but there's no benefit. I mean, being a second seed is not any really worse than being a first seed. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not an analyst. I just,
I'll believe it when I see it.
You're trying to say 40 is old or something?
Yeah. For the NBA, it's old.
You think LeBron will get coached someday? No. Once he can't play anymore, he'll still have his edge.
He's gonna make to 100 papers, so.
Maybe like an Owen, but I don't know about it.
That would be even worse.
Not as bad as Michael Jordan. Totally horrible.
Was that true? Yeah, I'm with you there.
It's not really bad, that's worse than Michael Jordan.
I just think that there's people who just don't have team problems with this and then live work.
And then live for it?
They have no live work. This is the laptop I brought. I just put this once. That's how we started.
Yeah, but it's-
January of 07. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
He's been the franchise player for every team he's been on.
What? Exactly. Just go. Every team he goes on, he's a franchise player.
Triple doubles at 40.
Just saying, you don't appreciate Jordan stuff.
I appreciate Jordan. He did a lot for the game.
I appreciate-
No, it's not that they did a lot for the game, he was dominant.
No.
I appreciate
Bulls were
Jordan,
dominant.
but if you
Jordan
look at
dominated
how many
his
all
club.
NBA, I appreciate Jordan, but if you look at how many all NBA teammates Jordan had versus LeBron's during his career, like he led like this one Cavs team with like Mo Williams, their best, second best player, like 65 minutes or something.
Big C.
Shaq, y'all don't appreciate Shaq for how dominant he was. Just did.
He could have shoot
Okay,
free
that-
throws. He could have won three. He barely missed three. He could make one free.
Yeah, no, that's why he was so good. Because he was like a big. Yeah, no, that's part of why.
It's the way things go. In another 15 years, people on the state have to run the next whatever. Just like I don't appreciate Will Chamberlain, really, I should have like put in experience.
That's what makes it player. It's just not real.
Play against Palmer.
Jordan played against substitute games. You think he scored 100 points in the end? Just happened, you know, cameras on.
It was the one thing they didn't issue on their team. Why would, it's like, it would be a big conspiracy, like, everyone would be like, I was there at that game and he didn't score 100, no one says that.
No, I feel like if he gets to 70, someone's got to see on camera.
Nowadays, it's something special. Back then, it was like, this is real thing and all. Cause you like the Lakers, have you watched that? I don't know the name. They did a new documentary now, like 2 years ago, I think. It was really good. Maybe, I don't remember.
I don't think that was like a documentary, like more like a.
No, not a reenactment, not that one. There's another one where they talk about the team and it focuses on the Bucks family and like, them trying to like take the dad's place of like running the team and the transition from Kareem into Shaq and Kobe to LeBron and like their struggle, like, I don't know, it was really good though, I don't remember how much say it was HBO, I don't remember, but it's only a couple years old and it was really good.
Are you a fan of the Lakers?
Yeah, I like the Lakers, I just hate it.
I can't really say I'm a fan of any NBA team.
I like Luka, but
I would say
Austin
it's,
Reeves is pretty good too.
I would say my favorite team is the Grizzlies, but I haven't really been enough. Like the past few years, taught myself to think. I have a high bar that makes you a man. I just don't look at
Okay, you guys still have about 12 minutes. I'm going to give up on passing back papers for today just because my hand's about to fall off, but there's still a few more in here. You guys are always welcome to take your papers out of there, though. I'll try to get the rest back to you soon, but I got no more in there today.
Trading Austin Reed for that Andrew would be
Way more than all of us.
yeah, but Austin Reed, this was his first breakout season.
That's not a good trade. Just for us, maybe like for a few like.
You wanna let Austin
First round
Reed
picks or something.
develop even further.
Well, okay, I don't know if it's one.
I think Grace is the only one I know.
I like Booker, like, when he did the Olympics, he was just told to do what he needed. There's not as many NBA players that do that anymore, so.
Austin Reeves is finding third
I don't want to talk
option.
about it.
Austin Reeves is finding third option.
What is there? Is it even nice?
Double team, still hits the contested three to win it all. LeBron just shot. He was there to. He helped recruit the players to play.
Michael Jordan.
Yeah, he actually did.
Michael Jordan didn't contribute the most to the dream team either. That's Paul Barkley.
Strong disagree.
I'm talking like specifically like performances. Like Charles Barkley put up the most stats for the dream team.
Stats aren't necessarily the best. The stats are different these days. Nowadays, guards get lots of rebounds because bigs run down the court and they're trying to get open shots. And that didn't used to be the case.
Yeah, Curry had two defensive players.
We should just move on cabin rather than.
We should like ban
Also, just a reminder, even though it's not Monday, you do go to normal advisory today, since there was not normal advisory yesterday. And the only day for movement this week is Thursday. There's more Atlas testing tomorrow. And Friday is, Friday's no school. That's why there's no.
So, it says in the paper that this should be a good grade.
I forgot to ask for it yet, so I can take it.
Okay, cool.
I'm gonna ask for it next class. Or the class after, but I can put it in now. Some people start turning it in even though I didn't ask for it. That's why I put it in gradebook.
Okay, thank you. And this is the Unit 4 and 5 review corrections. I forgot to turn it in this morning.
All my I thought